Thomas. So folks, we are ready to rumble. Hold a moment, folks. So welcome one and all, folks. Welcome to this morning Out and About, Just Cool Media in collaboration with GBN. And this morning, folks, we are on Fort George, formerly known as Fort Royal, and also Fort Rupert. So welcome one and all, folks. Welcome to this morning Out and About, Just Cool Media in collaboration with GBN. This morning, folks, we are on Fort George, and we'll give you some of the history of this interesting location in Grenada in the town of St. George. Welcome, folks. Welcome one and all, folks. Towering 175 feet above St. George's Harbour, Fort George is not only the oldest but undoubtedly the most significant fort on the island, having always stood at the focal point as major changes occurred in the military landscape in Grenada. So you see, folks, we are 175 feet above the St. George's Harbour, and you're looking directly, folks, at the St. George's Harbour from George. Welcome one and all, folks. Happy Saturday, folks. As we are on the historical site of Fort George. Dating back to the 1600s, while Grenada was still a French colony, Fort George was originally known as Fort Royal. So we're standing 175 feet above the St. George's Harbour, and we're looking directly at the St. George's Harbour. We are looking down to Port Louis Marina from Fort George, formerly known as Fort Royal. So this fort was designed by Francis Blondel in 1666 and was built in 1667. Fort Royal served as a battery commanding views of the Carenage. Then the central part of La Ville de Fort. So St. George's in the 1600s was known as La Ville du Fort Royal, now known as St. George's. Interesting history, folks, as we are on Fort George, folks. This out and about in collaboration with GBN. As we climb the stairs, between 1701 and 1773 and 1713, Fort Royal was upgraded as part of a plan to make Grenada a trading post for the Asiento, an agreement between Spain and Great Britain in 1713 that governed the supply of African slaves in the Spanish colonies of the Americas. So now we enter in a tunnel. And as we enter this courtyard, folks, for those of you who remembered this era, on Bloody Wednesday, 1983, October 19th, so we are out in the courtyard, folks.
Hey, keep eyes fucking west here.
The tree. He's just next to the tree.
Mark the target.
100 meters to your right.
This was the song, folks, on Bloody Wednesday, October 19th, 1983, when Maurice Bishop, along with some of his cabinet ministers, was killed right against this wall. So this is part of our history, folks. On Bloody Wednesday, 1983, October 19th, Maurice Bishop, along with some of his cabinet ministers, yes, that's history, folks, and written on this wall in everlasting memory of Prime Minister Maurice Bishop, Fitzroy Bain, Norris Bain, Evelyn Bullen, Jacqueline Creff, Keith Halin, Evelyn Maitland, Unison Whiteman, Andy Sebastian Alexander, Simon Alexander, Gemma Belma, Eric Dumont, Avis Ferguson, Vernice Noel, Arlene Romaine, and Nelson Steele, killed at this fort on October 19, 1983. They have gone to join the stars and will forever shine in glory. So folks, right here it happened on Bloody Wednesday, October 19th, 1983. Also, Fort George was known for another shooting. Grenada former police commissioner went on a shooting rampage at police headquarters Wednesday, another Wednesday in Grenada history, Wednesday, June 28, 1989, killing the commissioner and a U.S. diplomat and wounding 2 other officers. The shooting occurred around 11:30 a.m. at Fort George. Cosmos Raymond was killed. Daniel Seals, the acting superintendent, and Collinsborough deputy police commissioner were wounded and taken to the general hospital. So folks, on Fort George, we have the massive 1800 cast iron cannons. The massive 1800 cast iron cannons. Still, we have 5 of them pointing towards the sea, set as protection to protect folks coming to. And we have a wonderful view here, folks, at the cruise ship terminal right here from Fort George. A beautiful view of the cruise ship terminal. Yes, folks, for those of you who didn't know, the 2 shootings take place up on this fort. We had October 19th, that's Bloody Wednesday, and then we have June 20th, 1989, when the commissioner of police was shot, killed, along with a U.S. diplomat, and 2 other police officials got injured. So Fort George is considered as the most important historical structure in St. George's for its part in all the political and military changes that have taken place in the island over the last 300 years. Fort George, the imagery of a classic period of European fortifications includes parade, 2 barracks, gun rooms, gunpowder magazine, water cistern, sally port, and firing galleries. Today, Fort George serves as the police headquarters with an unmatched view of the tongue of St. George and the ocean. Much of its elaborate colonial structure remains intact as part of a pleasure of a visit. Yes, folks, so this morning we are out and about and we are on the historical site of Fort George, formerly known as Fort Royal, then Fort Rupert, and back to Fort George, folks. And here we go. Up here is where the lighthouse used to be to provide signal for ships coming in the harbor. Folks, a majestic view of downtown St. George's right here from the beautiful Fort George. And we have a view of all the churches on Church Street. We have the Presbyterian Church, the one closest to us. We have the Anglican Church, and we have the Catholic Church. Also on Fort George, folks, when the slave rebellion started, all of the British soldiers were cornered in the fort. However, as time went by, the fort was getting less and less important, and they abandoned it. Another important factor in the abandonment was cholera, which killed many soldiers right here on Fort George. Many British soldiers died here on Fort George, not with gunfire, but with cholera. And after the British seized control of the island in 1762, Fort Royal was renamed Fort George in the honor of King George III. And La Ville de Fort Royal was renamed to St. George's, the town. So the town of St. George in 1762, the name was changed from La Ville de Fort Royal to St. George's. Folks, this morning we are out and about. We are doing our first historical site in our Saturday morning out and about. Just Cool Media in collaboration with GBN. And we see there's 5 cast iron cannon standing strong over the centuries. And here we have a view of the General Hospital. So welcome one and all, folks. Today we are out and about, and we are on the historic Fort George. Formerly known as Fort Royal, and it was named Fort Rupert from 1979 to 1983 in honor of Rupert Bishop, Maurice Bishop's dad. And here we are, folks. We have a majestic view of the southern tip of the island from Fort George. Majestic view, folks. We can view all the way down to Point Celine and all the way right back up to the beautiful Carenage, folks. We are viewing this section towards the inner harbor. We can see from the wall, we can see the southern part of the port, section of the port. We can see the southern coastline towards Granans Beach, down to the extreme tip of the island, folks. Down to the extreme tip of the island. Frederick, usefulness. To this day, the stones could talk. If the stones could talk, just imagine the story that will be told of Fort George. As the song said, if walls could talk, if those stones could talk to us, they will tell us some interesting stories of the events that happened here over the years. So yes, folks, we are looking at the pictorial carnage, folks, where we see the fire station along with the St. George's Port. So folks, when you come into Grenada, come visit Fort George. And maybe if you can listen to the walls, you can hear the walls talking to you, giving you the stories that happened here so many years ago. So Fort George is towering 175 feet above the St. George's Harbor. So right now, folks, I'm standing 175 feet above the St. George's Harbor. It's not only the oldest, but undoubtedly the most significant fort on the island, having always stood at a focal point in major changes occurred in the political and military landscape of Grenada. Dating back to the 1600s, while Grenada was still a French colony, Fort George, originally known as Fort Royal, designed by Francis Blondel in 1666 and built in 1667. Fort Royal served as a battery with commanding views over the Carnage, then the central port of entry, and La Ville de Fort Royal, that's St. George's, now known as St. George's, the hub of economical and political social activities on the island. So welcome, folks. We are on Fort George, formerly known as Fort Royal. Between 1701 and 1713, Fort Royal was upgraded as part of a plan of making Grenada a trading post for the Asiento, an agreement forged between Spain and Great Britain in 1730, which governed the supply of African slaves to the Spanish colonies in the Americas. So Grenada was a central point in the supply of slaves to the Americas. Credited for the new design is Jean de Gaulle de Carlos. The fort was in praise for the finest original example of Van Buren style masonry in the Western Hemisphere. When the slave rebellion started, all the British soldiers were cornered in the fort. However, as time went on, the fort was getting less and less important, and they abandoned it. Another important factor in the abandonment was cholera, which killed many of the soldiers. So not only folks died here due to gunfire, but also due to cholera. So if only the walls could talk, folks, the walls will tell us some interesting stories of this historic site, Fort George. Now another beautiful view right here in Fort George. And now we are viewing the Carnage. So folks, after the British seized control of the island in 1762, Fort Royal, which was named so by the French, was renamed to Fort George in honor of King George III. Ville de Fort Royal, now known as St. George's. So in the 1700s, our town, now called St. George, was known as La Ville de Fort Royal. And in 1979, the fort became the headquarters of the People's Revolutionary Army and was renamed Fort Rupert in memory of Rupert Bishop, the father of the then Prime Minister Maurice Bishop. Forever etched in the minds of the memories of the people, it's the execution of at least 24 persons in the central courtyard of Fort Rupert, including Prime Minister Bishop and 4 of his cabinet members, by the more Marxist wing of his party. By the most Marxist wing of his party. So sorry for the breaking transmission there, folks. So folks, we are on the historic Fort George. So folks, we are looking down at the courtyard. On October 19th, 1983. It's a windy Saturday, folks. Yes, folks, on October 19th, 1983, Grenadian soldiers stormed the fort and opened fire on demonstrators who had just freed Maurice Bishop from house arrest. And they were gathered right here in this courtyard. Soon after the soldiers lined up Mr. Maurice Bishop, some of his cabinet members and supporters against the wall at Fort Rupert and shot them dead. So then after, we had 6 days of curfew, 6 long days of curfew. When we heard the recording, anyone found violating the curfew will be shot at sight. So on the evening of October 19th, we heard this recording. Anyone who found violating the curfew will be shot at sight. So folks, this morning we are on Fort George. Just taking you to the different views. For those of you who just joined, folks, we have the 5 cannons still standing. So in all, we have 9 cannons still standing. So we're going to take a walk down into the courtyard, folks. And now Fort George is the headquarters of the Royal Grenada Police Force. And I heard, growing up as a child, that all the forts were connected by tunnels. So that Fort George was connected to Fort Frederick and also to Fort Matthew. That's what I heard. I don't know how true it is, but there is a possibility that you could have traveled from one fort to the next. So welcome one and all folks. This morning we're doing historical sites and we are at Fort George, and here is a tunnel, folks. I'm not sure where this tunnel leads to, but apparently this is a tunnel that will lead you all the way up to Fort Frederick. I'm subject to correction, but here we are, folks, on the beautiful Fort George. So just giving you a brief history, folks. Some of the stuff I didn't even learn it in the history books in school, folks, but I've learned it in order to share it with you today, folks. So it's here, Fort George, and folks, now we are looking directly at the cruise ship terminal, folks, which has been deserted since the coronavirus started, folks. Yes, Les Lacey, go in the tunnel with me. Okay, folks, we are viewing right down Melville Street. We have Bruce Street, the Bruce Street Mall. We have all the way down to the bus terminal, folks. Yes, a lot of history, folks. And Fort George is 175 foot above the St. George's Harbor. Back in the 1600s, while Grenada was still a French colony, Fort George was originally known as Fort Royal, designed by Francis Blondel in 1666, and it was built in 1667. Fort Royal served as a commanding point for the French. You can see the carronade, then you can see the central point of entry, and we are looking at La Ville de Fort Royal. That was the name of St. George's. And between 1701 and 1713, the fort was upgraded as a plan for the slave trade from the Asiento Agreement formed between Spain and Britain that governed the supply of African slaves to the Spanish colonies of the Americas. When the slave rebellion started, all the British soldiers were cornered in the fort. However, as time went by, the fort get less and less important, and they abandoned it because another important factor in the abandonment was cholera, which killed many soldiers. So during the slave rebellion, soldiers were gathered, hidden at the Fort George, and then cholera broke out, so it killed a lot of them. So folks, this morning is history. A history lesson out and about, just cool, in collaboration with GBN. And straight ahead of you, with the building with the clock, that's the Presbyterian Church, which was destroyed during Hurricane Ivan, but is being rebuilt on the original structure. So folks, this morning we're taking you on our tour, taking our time on the beautiful Fort George, which had two former names. Fort Royal, given to it by the French, because this fort was built by the French, and also Fort Rupert, the name given to it during 1979 to 1983 in honor of Rupert Bishop, the then Prime Minister Maurice Bishop's father, and Fort George, the name given to it by the British when the British took over the island. Folks, it's tempting to go down into that cave. I'll go down a bit, not all the way, to see. Oh, there are steps going down, folks. I'm not going to show what I'm going to meet, but I'm going down in a tunnel, folks. Okay, folks, so we are in the tunnel. Oh, okay, folks. We are down in the tunnel in Fort George. Folks, we are in the tunnels of Fort George. We have different vantage points for also for ventilation and for hiding. So we are down in the belly of Fort George, folks. Dating back to the 6th, Fort George was originally known as Fort Royal, designed by Francis Blondel in 1666 and built in 1667. Fort Royal served as a commanding post for the French with a view of the Carnage, the central entry point of the island, and La Ville du Fort Royal. Yes, folks, we come out from down in the belly of Fort George. So this has been your history class on this Saturday morning, out and about. Just School Media in collaboration with GBN. So folks, thank you for supporting Just School. Thank you for making GBN your station of choice for news, entertainment, information, history. Now we have two cannons facing over to Church Street. Yes, folks, we just came from the belly of Fort George. Kind of dark, a little creepy. So folks, now we have a closer view. You have a closer view of La Ville de Fort Royal. Folks, we are looking at directly at La Ville du Fort Royal. Yes, folks, I know they usually have school trips here before Corona. Schools come there on trips, but I'm not sure of all the history they will tell them. You're welcome, folks. So, folks, if you are enjoying, let us know, folks. And this has been Out and About Just Cool in collaboration with GBN. Folks, we are looking from Fort George. We are looking at the Bruce Street and Melville Street all the way up to the bus terminal and fish market. And then as we turn, we are looking at all the churches. We have the Presbyterian Church, we have the Anglican Church, we have the Catholic Church. So Church Street, that's where you have churches, and we're looking at so folks, just letting you know a brief history of Fort Royal. On October 19th, 1983, Bloody Wednesday, when Maurice Bishop, along with at least 24 people, was executed on that Bloody Wednesday. Also on another Wednesday, that's June 28, 1989, the police commissioner was shot dead, along with a U.S. diplomat, and two other police officials were injured right here in Fort George. And also, when the slave rebellion took out, the British soldiers who came here to secure themselves and hidden, also cholera broke out. So that killed a lot of British soldiers right here on Fort George. So people, if the walls of Fort George could talk, imagine the stories it's going to tell us, folks. The stories of soldiers crying, groaning in pain, dying from cholera. The stories of people screaming on October 19th, 1983, as they scaled the wall to get away from gunfire, as they were shot to death. Also the story of June 1989, when the police commissioner was shot at the police headquarters by a former police commissioner, along with a U.S. diplomat and two other police officials. Folks, this is the brief history of my beautiful Grenada, island of conflict, as said by the late George Bridgeland, the island of conflict. So folks, we gotta pass on the history from generation to generation, folks. These histories are not written in the history book. But folks, these are some of the history that happens right here on the beautiful Fort George. So folks, thank you. And for those of you, you know that from 11 o'clock, folks, we will have our virtual tour, Just Cool virtual tours from 11. So you'll stay tuned to Just School Photos Facebook page. From 11, folks, we'll be going all the way up Cherry Hill, Molineux, Dragon Bay, Sawa, Grenville Vale, Anadale Waterfalls. But folks, today, this morning, we gave you a history lesson as we are out and about on Fort George, which also was known as Fort Royal, named by the French and renamed when the British took over to Fort George in honor of King George III. And also it was in 1979, here was the military the headquarters of the PRG, the People's Revolutionary Government, and it was named Fort Rupert in honor of Rupert Bishop, the father of the then Prime Minister Maurice Bishop. With this view, panoramic view of the tongue of St. George. And now, Fort George housed the headquarters of the Royal Grenada Police Force. You're welcome, folks. You're welcome. And there's much more history lessons to be learned from Just School Virtual Adventure Tours, folks, to learn the ins and outs, the roads, and the places in Grenada, folks. You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you, folks. So also, folks, you can become a sponsor of Just School. You're welcome, folks. And in order to get the history to give you, folks, I had to do some research. I spent yesterday into last night doing research to bring you this history of Fort George. So folks, you're welcome, and I thank you. Thank you for supporting GBN. Thank you for supporting Just School. Just give you a close the last minute, folks. Any of you want to take any screenshots? So I'll pause so you can take your screenshots. that's where I am, folks. I'm on Fort Royal and I'm viewing La Ville de Fort Royal. A very important history, folks. If only the walls of Fort Royal would talk, they will have some amazing stories to tell us from the 1600s all up to today, folks. From the 1600s all up to today. Imagine the stories that they will tell us. So folks, I thank you. Remember, set your alarm for 11 when we will begin our Just Cool virtual adventure tour for this Saturday, folks. It's going to be an interesting one, folks. So look out for the notification at 11 o'clock, folks. So I thank you very much. Thank you for being part of Out and About this morning as we did historical site and we give you a history lesson, folks. A history lessons. Okay, folks? Thank you very much, folks. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Have yourself a wonderful Saturday. This is your guy. Right, this is your guy, folks. Just Cool. I thank you very much. Thank you for coming on this Out and About with me this morning. Thank you for the history lesson given. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I learned a lot, and I hope you learned a lot this Saturday, folks. So it's all about GBN and Just Cool, keeping you informed, entertained, also educated on the different aspects of our amazing island, our island of conflict. Yes, folks, this war will tell you a lot. So I just thank you, folks. Thank you very much. Thank you for supporting Just Cool. And this is your guy behind Just Cool. Thank you. Thank you, folks. I'm going to have a drink of water. Let me get some coconut water downtown. A drink of water. It's very hot outside. So I thank you very much, folks. Thank you. And remember, 11 o'clock, we have that virtual adventure tour. So this has been your morning Out and About. Just Cool in collaboration with GBN.